355, introduced by Senator Cannon.
Thank you. I'm here on behalf of Senator Birdsell, who can't be here today, but I have the honor of introducing her bill. Thank you, Senator French and esteemed colleagues on the panel. Senate Bill 355, I'm just going to really summarize her stuff, and she has a nice 4 pages, but you don't want to listen to it, and I don't want to read it. So it establishes safeguards for consumers and third-party sellers. So right now we're having a problem. There's a flood of counterfeit goods in America. We're watching, you have clothing, toys, and we don't want to be, if you buy a Graco baby seat, you want to know it was engineered and properly tested. You don't want to knock off. So if you buy something online, you want to know that you're getting what's good. Right now, the counterfeit industry is $509 billion. Costs small businesses who are trying to sell you the right product a lot of money. 32% of e-commerce sales is now going on third-party marketplaces. So we have to get the fraudsters out of the game. No parent should, like I said, on a car seat, you shouldn't have to question, did I get the car seat that's real and safe, that's engineered, or did I get a knockoff that's, I'm not going to know until I'm in an accident. So this is a modest bill. It really isn't asking for a lot. It's asking for, again, I'll turn in the test, what Senator Birdsell had, and it's much more in depth. But we'll just keep to the nuts and bolts. They're asking for name and address, email, phone, verified tax number. My daughter, who's, as you know, is stuck home because she tore her Achilles and not going to college, she's been selling a ton of goods. I don't know what's missing out of my house, Senator French, but probably a lot of stuff. And, but she's under 5,000, so this wouldn't apply to her at all. So again, it's only people who are doing sales that are serious businesses. If you're small, it's not going to apply to you. Again, so name, address, email, phone number, verified tax ID. That's all you have to do when you're selling goods, again, only over $5,000. I want to be able to call someone if I have a question or want to return the good, or I think it's a defective good. You can't, if you're selling and really getting into it and you're not just a small person like my daughter's, almost a lemonade stand type sales. If you're that type, you don't have to do this stuff. But if you're really getting into selling goods and services, you should be accountable. Someone should be able to call you up. And that is the crust of the bill. It's supported by CVS, Home Depot, Walgreens. I could go on and on. I'll turn in the list. There must be 300 businesses who are supporting this. It's an impressive list. And again, I'll turn in Senator Birdsell's testimony. I urge you to support the balanced approach that'll help consumers in New Hampshire be protected. Thank you, Senator French and committee. I can take any questions, but there are people coming after me who are far more knowledgeable about the subject.
Great, thank you,
want to ask
Senator.
them.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I heard there was an amendment from Senator Birdsell. Do we know that?
I have not been informed of that.
Don't think I've seen it yet. I know there is one coming. We won't be taking action on this today.
Why not?
Why not? Because I'm not ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator French.
And Kevin Callahan is opposed and not speaking. Christina Fisher is opposed and not speaking. Chris Gilring from Telnet is opposed and not speaking. Joe Cortez is opposed and not speaking. William Pimenko is opposed, not speaking. And Curtis Berry is in support and is speaking. Curtis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm Curtis Barry here this afternoon on behalf of the New Hampshire Retail Association. And I think all of you are aware of the New Hampshire Retail Association, which represents several hundred members, they're retailers of all shapes and sizes. Over the past 23 sessions that I've represented, 23 annual sessions that I've represented the association, we've identified weaknesses in shoplifting or the theft statutes relative specifically to what the industry refers to as organized retail crime. The policy proposal contained in Senate Bill 355, which the association supports, has caused a reasonable amount of debate, not only among legislators in various states and the federal government, but among the members of the association itself. And that's why the Retail Association has only recently taken a position to support the bill. And, you know, there may be differing opinions, but the reality is, at this point, organized retail theft, many times by aggressive means in stores, has risen, and the pandemic has exacerbated it over the last couple of years. Retail workers, the frontline folks, the essential workers have to face this on a regular basis. And recently, I think we heard from a member who cited that reason, that's at least part of the reason why they're having difficulty hiring people, because they understand they need to face that situation. Now, the New Hampshire legislature has a long history of working with us to support various pieces of legislation when we've addressed those weaknesses in the shoplifting statutes or the theft statutes. Together, we've passed numerous bills over the last couple of decades. For example, we've given tools to law enforcement to pursue the fence or the middleman in the stolen goods supply chain, if you will. We've given tools to prosecutors to impose robust penalties, vigorous penalties against those who steal in large quantities for profit with the intention of selling the items for profit. And it is, as you can imagine, an issue near and dear to the heart of the industry. So much so that the association, the state association, awards a Law Enforcement Partner of the Year award every year to individual, could be an officer, it could be a department that has helped in a particular way regarding organized retail crime. So we view Senate Bill 355 at this point as an essential piece of that whole package. It addresses a venue for peddling stolen merchandise that maybe wasn't a viable avenue 12 years ago, 20 years ago when we were doing some of the other bills. And as Senator Gannon mentioned in his introduction, this is a problem that the U.S. Department of Homeland Security has identified as a $500 billion criminal enterprise. Now, like other pieces of legislation, the industry does prefer a federal solution, but nobody in this room today is going to be shocked that there's inaction in the U.S. Congress. So we think it's time now to pass this legislation to help provide a method of impeding those who seek to profit from stealing from New Hampshire retailers. The folks that are driving the issue nationwide are major retailers. Those folks represent within the New Hampshire Retail Association over 100 locations in this state, tens of thousands of employees. But please make no mistake, this is an issue that can affect retailers of all sizes. Within the last 2 weeks, there was the episode in the news. A small jewelry store in the mall at Rockingham experienced somebody setting off a smoke bomb in what I'm told was a failed attempt at theft. Those folks now have to deal with perhaps damaged merchandise, the cost of cleanup, time that the store is closed. These are costs that we all end up paying for one way or another as consumers. This bill goes a long way in taking away an easy venue for folks to sell the stolen goods. And I'd like to make one last point, Mr. Chair, that in our view, the bill not only helps the retailers that I've mentioned and that I represent, but in two ways helps the small business, the legitimate sellers on online marketplaces. In the first case, many times folks will steal something, it's new, it's in the box, they advertise it as such, but they sell it for pennies on the dollar. There's no cost of goods sold for them, right? It's zero, everything they get is profit, which means they can potentially undercut in the price that they offer it for somebody who's selling the same product in a used condition. The second case is example that was used in the introduction of the bill as well, relative to counterfeit goods. And there are many articles on this. There's one that comes to mind in particular. I believe it was from Ohio. Somebody was selling a knockoff, and it was not up to the quality standards that the original product was built to. People bought it, people complained, and the ratings for the real product went down, and the individual's business suffered because of that. I'm happy to supply you with that and many other articles. That's an episode that appeared in the major newspaper, New York Times, or something similar. So for those reasons, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, we support this bill and ask that you pass it as quick as possible. I'm happy to answer questions to the best of my ability.
Thank you. How many online marketplaces are there at this point?
I'm not sure I could give you a full and accurate answer. I mean, I think we all know the big names. There may be others that I'm not aware of. I don't utilize them frequently.
So this would affect all of those online marketplaces?
Well, I think you would, Mr. Chair, I think you'd have to refer to the definitions in the statute to determine who it applies to.
You don't know to tell me?
If you gave me a specific online marketplace, we could look at the definitions and see if that in fact applies.
Facebook Marketplace?
Potentially. I don't use Facebook Marketplace. I don't know if under this definition or perhaps the amendment that was referenced, if the definition changes, if that would apply. I'm not certain.
Okay. Is that again?
Thanks for taking my question. My kids are home from college, and the other one's at home selling her stuff on Amazon, but she's also working at the mall with her sister today. They were in that same incident where they were right next door to the smoke bomb going off, and they came home with a story to tell me. Every day there's shoplifting they're working at Abercrombie or Hollister, one of those ones, which they're all related, and they're not allowed to stop shoplifters. They're told to just let them go. If they see them putting the thing in, if they come out when they have 15 pieces of clothing, let them go. Even when if they say they don't have anything, you'll let them go. What's that adding to the cost? I know there's like a $560 billion. Is there a cost? Like, do you know, is it 10% of the goods sold in New Hampshire now we're paying for?
I have,
Increased cost?
yeah, thank you for the question. I have that data, but not with me.
Okay,
I'm happy
that's fine.
to provide that. But a logical reason why that circumstance that you described, they're asked
Sure.
not to stop them.
Yep.
Retail employees, as you know, are not trained in detention, conflict resolution, things like that. Most retailers will provide that instruction, as I understand it, just for the safety of employees.
Sure.
And there are other ways to address it.
Yeah, just the cost. I wondered how much we're paying more for that beautiful suit that Senator French has on. Is he paying 10 or 20%? I looked at you and then I saw that. Then I looked away. So is it adding 10% to our goods, and how much is it actually costing New Hampshire?
Yeah, I have that data.
Sure.
can
And I know
retrieve that and
Walgreens
provide it.
is one, they've come out with specific numbers. It's like 20% of we're paying increase for goods.
Right. I'd be
So it
happy to-
concerns me. Thank you.
Provide that. Thank you.
Senator Bradley?
Thank you very much. So you referenced a stalled federal bill. Am I correct in understanding that Senate Bill 355, and especially with the amendment, is modeled on that federal legislation? Is that correct?
I'm not sure I can fully answer that. As the Retail Association very recently took a position to support this, so I'm learning the details of this particular text sort of on the fly. I think there are a couple of different versions, and I'm not sure, I couldn't tell you specifically which one this is closest to or precisely similar to.
And it's also my understanding that the folks that are opposed to this bill here in New Hampshire today have accepted the federal proposed legislation. Is that correct?
One of them. That's my understanding.
Okay. Okay.
Senator Susie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just two questions, and they're specific to the bill. I don't know if you have a copy in front of you.
I do.
One is on the the first page of the text of the bill, line 12, where it says 200 or more discrete sales or transactions. If that number were increased, would your organization still support it?
I wouldn't be able to answer that right now. I'd have
Without
to
a
check with them.
specific number?
Yeah.
Let's just say it was 400.
Even, with you asking me about a specific number, I'd have to
Okay.
seek advice on that.
That's fair, that's fair. And the other one is on page, labeled as page 3 of the bill, line 16. So my understanding is that one of these high-volume sellers who has provided contact information, right, so the online marketplace shall require the high-volume third-party seller in such online marketplace to provide and disclose to consumers in a conspicuous manner their full name, though conspicuously placed, and the following information. So I've received several constituent emails saying that they felt this was an invasion of privacy and would discourage them actually from participating in online. And I haven't responded to them yet. I wanted to wait to hear the testimony, but I'm just wondering if you could give me some idea how I should respond or what you would suggest.
Well, I think, first of all, again, I'm learning the nuts and bolts of this particular language, but in
And you're not the
particular...
only person I'll ask, so I'm not putting you alone on the spot, Curtis, I
Thank you.
promise.
But what jumped out at me when reading it is line 31, so Roman 2, which seems to provide some rationale that can be presented for not providing the full information. So there may be opportunities to not, given a certain circumstance.
Okay, fair, thank you.
Any others? Thank you.
Thank you.
Sandy Fowler is opposed, not wishing to speak. Susan Baker, opposed, not looking to speak. David LaFave, opposed, not looking to speak. Diane what's that? I can't read it. Opposed, not looking to speak. Tim Clark, opposed, not looking to speak. Michael Gayak, please come up. Is in support.
In support, yes.
Please state your name for the record.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Michael Gia. I'm the president of the New Hampshire Police Association. The New Hampshire Police Association is an organization that represents all aspects of law enforcement in the state, from a first-year police officer to a chief of police. We are here today in support of Senate Bill 355. Many of you have probably seen the recent news accounts of smash and grab thefts at retail establishments. This is a criminal problem that is occurring in almost every state. It is a significant concern that creates increased police activity and creates a feeling of insecurity for many businesses. Organized thefts really thrive when there is the opportunity to easily sell stolen goods. And quite frankly, some online platforms make it way too easy for them to anonymously unload stolen property. Without the appropriate verification by these platforms of who the sellers are, criminals exploit the anonymous aspects of some marketplace platforms. Additionally, retail stores and their employees are put in harm's way when professional thieves confront them to steal merchandise that is sold online. And I'm certain just about every police department in New Hampshire has received complaints about counterfeit merchandise being sold to our residents. Many of these illicit products come from overseas, so catching them is difficult by the simple verification process, and easy disclosures in SB 355 will have a chilling effect on criminal use of these platforms. We believe passage of SB 355 will help reduce the amount of stolen property that is sold online. It will help curtail the smash and grab thefts we are seeing so often today, and it will make it extremely difficult for fraudsters to unload counterfeit goods because they won't be able to hide behind an anonymous posting. SB 355 is good for consumers and it is good for legitimate sellers who are up against these bad actors. For these reasons, the New Hampshire Police Association urges you to pass SB 355.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In your experience, have you ever, or do you know of police departments that have seen stolen goods being advertised online and contacted the companies to find out who these people were? Or how would you go about that?
So I'm also a detective with the Salem Police Department. Yes, we've encountered many complaints such as this. And the first thing we go to, Facebook Marketplace, for example. There's a lot of things. This is just a tool for police departments to use as an investigative tool to further investigate the complaints. Having this information that we're looking for in this bill would help police department move in a direction where someone might be taken in custody for stolen goods.
Could you give me an example?
For example, if you were to put your name, date of birth, and address, and a phone number, and we have a complaint of a stolen bicycle that's being advertised on Facebook Marketplace, for example. There's a process for me to get that information from Facebook, which is a grand jury subpoena that will be able to get that information easily. That would lead me to probably interviewing a person of interest. So it's helpful for us as a police department.
Okay, how about counterfeit goods? You say a lot of them come from overseas?
I mean, not with my department, but I'm sure it's out there somewhere.
Yeah, okay. Senator Gannon?
Just a couple of quick questions. You know, on child pornography and stuff, you have officers who go on and coax them out and then catch them. Is there anything going on between either state police, federal, maybe federally? Do they go looking for fraudulent sellers, big-time operations?
Are you talking about the New Hampshire Internet Crimes Against Children? I'm sorry, I missed
No,
it.
you know how they do that?
Yes.
Is there a similar thing at all going after stolen merchandise? Is there a federal program or anything where, like, I believe like Amazon, I think, has their own detectives who try to go after this stuff?
I mean, we get complaints all the time, but we do work with other agencies if a complaint arises, but nothing that I'm aware of personally that there's a task force specifically for
Okay,
this.
thank you.
issue. You're welcome.
Well said. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it. We have Jim Demers. He is in support, and do you want to speak? Yes.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is James Demers, and I'm here on behalf of several clients who support this bill. So let me first start off with Walmart, who not only is, as you all know, a major retailer in the state and across the country, but they also have a marketplace, online marketplace. They are in support of this bill for many of the reasons that you've heard already. That you know, being able to sell counterfeit products and stolen products in an anonymous fashion really helps the criminal be able to sell their goods. And that this kind of disclosure will go a long way to make sure that the people who are able to hide their identity have to disclose it up front, and therefore it will have a, as Mike said, will have a chilling effect on those who will try to use these platforms to engage in fraudulent activity. Senator Sousa, you asked the question earlier about the small business that might have concerns, and I think first, you know, as Mr. Barry said, the triggers that are in the bill, the 200 transactions per year, and, it's not or, but and above $5,000 covers a significant number of small businesses that use these marketplaces. But if they are an individual, not a business, but a personal individual, they have the ability to block certain information from being posted. So, for example, their home address wouldn't be posted. Under those circumstances, it would be the state they're located in and the country. And as you can imagine, and what you've heard already, is there is a huge amount of counterfeit products that are being sold on these marketplaces that are coming from foreign countries. And it is very, very difficult for New Hampshire or any state law enforcement to shut down, an operation in China that is selling fraudulent goods. I'm going to share a story with you because one of the individuals who works here and for the state Senate, back when the COVID epidemic began, purchased face masks from one of the leading marketplaces. To her, because she didn't know from looking at it, she thought they were coming from the United States. It took 4 weeks for those masks to arrive because they were coming from China. And when she opened the package, they were filled with mold and completely disgusting. She literally had to get them into a garbage can immediately. There was no way for her to contact that seller to try to get a refund because it didn't list who the seller was. She had no idea who she was doing business with. And I think for some of those small businesses, Senator Susie, that are concerned about that, that is the exact reason why this is good, because it protects the legitimate sellers from those type of fraudsters who are on these websites trying to sell their products. I will say too that I'm really encouraged because I've heard today that it seems like all the stakeholders are in agreement with the language that's in a federal House bill. When this bill was introduced here in New Hampshire, it was back in September. The House bill that people have expressed comfort with, that language did not come out until October 5th. And I think certainly my client and others are agreeable that that would make sense to amend this bill so that we use the language that everyone has agreed to at the federal level. And I have instructed Sean Thomas in my office to start drafting. He's got it almost done, so I will have for you in the next couple of days language that formats the federal language with this bill so that you can see the changes that are being made. And there are some changes, and one of them is an issue, Senator French, that you raised, and that is there are a lot of different marketplaces and different types of marketplaces. And I know you had expressed to me concern that there may be a marketplace that is more like an online classified ad, that marketplace is not collecting and processing the payment, they're just connecting the two parties, and you end up doing the transaction on your own with that individual. The language that's in the federal bill actually carves out those type of situations from what would be considered a high volume seller. So I think the federal bill also addresses, the concern that you had as well. So in that regard, I feel like we may have, a very strong and good compromise that everybody will be able to sign off on. So other clients of mine, the Pharmaceutical Manufacturers of America, they, I will submit their testimony as well as Walmart's. They are in support. They are extremely concerned that on many of these marketplaces, there are counterfeit prescription drugs that are making their way onto the market. People are getting injured. They think they're buying, the real McCoy, and they're not. And so they believe this will have a big effect on getting that type of situation under control as well. In addition to pharma, one of my clients, the Consumer Healthcare Products Association, that is a group of companies that manufacture and sell over-the-counter drugs. They're seeing the same problem. Mainly coming out of China, there is a huge number of counterfeit over-the-counter cough syrups and things like that that are being sold. They're being sold real cheap. People think it's the real thing. They can buy it for a lot less money, and it's not even safe for them to be taking those products. I have testimony from two clients, individuals who are not clients but sent me their comments. The Toy Association Many of you may have seen a segment that was on WMUR News last November about counterfeit toys coming from foreign countries that were making their way onto platforms as well. If you looked at these toys, you would probably see some differences. Although they were being marketed in fake boxes, they look just like, you think you're buying the real toy. They've got paints that are not approved by the Food and Drug Administration. They're dangerous, they're not built the same way, and they are knockoffs. They're illegal to be sold. But they've been able to make their way onto these websites as well. I have testimony from Home Depot. They, as you've probably seen in the news lately, have been the victims of many of these smash and grab situations where their products end up being sold cheaper by people who actually steal the real McCoy, but they're stolen goods and they're able to sell them online as well. So I think that, we're probably all in agreement that these online marketplaces are great. We've all used them. They are growing like crazy. But with their growth has come the opportunity for fraudsters to take advantage of these situations. This bill will go a long way to address those problems. And I think if we can amend this to have the federal language, we should have a good consensus document.
The end?
The end.
How, could you explain to me, so you're concerned with counterfeit products coming from China being advertised on these marketplaces and sold as the real thing?
Yes, that's one of the items.
And you think having their names and addresses in Beijing is going to help law enforcement to shut them down? So New Hampshire law enforcement has jurisdiction in China to shut them down. How would that work?
No.
No.
So, first of all, because there's a verification process of the information that would be submitted. So the online marketplace would have to verify documentation. They've got to demonstrate that they have a tax ID number.
In China?
If the money's going to go to China, they have to prove that. That's part of the information that would be disclosed, a tax identification number or bank account.
So the Chinese people have to have a U.S. tax ID number?
No, they could have a foreign.
Oh, so they'd have
But they have to prove that they're real.
Okay.
And that they're not doing that today. So if an entity, whether they're in the United States or a foreign country, has to be verified that they have a legitimate working address, they have a bank account, they have a tax ID number, the fraudsters aren't going to share that information with you because they're going to get caught. So our law enforcement won't be going after Chinese companies. The Chinese companies won't be signing up on the websites because they can't get verified by the marketplace.
So legitimate Chinese companies would, I just don't understand, I'm trying to understand this. Because I buy online often, and sometimes that stuff comes from China.
Yeah.
I don't know if they can meet some of these requirements.
Well, I will say this. There is a state that has already passed a law, Arkansas. It's been in effect for 6 months.
Home of Walmart.
Home of Walmart, but I don't think it really matters what state it is. The fact of the matter is every marketplace has to conform with that law in Arkansas if you're going to do business, and they all are.
And they are.
They are.
Okay. Senator Bradley? No. Senator Susie?
Thank you. Just one quick question. I obviously don't have the advantage of the updated legislation you talked about at the federal level. I wondered if that language preserves the definition of high-volume third-party seller, if it's still the 200 or more, up to 5, with an aggregate of 5,000.
Yes. So it is,
that would be the
that
current
language is
legislation?
part of the federal that
Okay.
everyone has agreed to. The only modification to that is the language, Senator French's issue, that carves out of the definition of a high-volume seller, an entity who is selling, but the marketplace is not processing or collecting the money.
Thank you.
Yeah,
One of my problems.
one.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Bob Hankins, signed in opposed, not wishing to speak. Paula Fougere, opposed, not looking to speak. Senator Ruth Ward, supports, and is not looking to speak. Montana Williams opposes, wants to speak.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chair French, and members of the committee. My name is Montana Williams, and I'm the Director of State and Local Public Policy for the Chamber of Progress. We are a tech industry coalition working toward technology's progressive future. Our organization works to ensure that all Americans benefit from technological leaps. Our corporate partners do include Amazon, Google, and Meta, but our partner companies don't have a vote or veto over our positions. We urge your committee to oppose SB 355. This bill has already been rejected by 15 state legislatures, will hurt small online sellers, and is unnecessary now that big box retailers and online marketplaces have endorsed a new compromise version of this bill at the federal level. SB 355 would make small online sellers collateral damage in Walmart's battle against Amazon. Brick and mortar marketplace giants are trying to stifle healthy competition and will ultimately hurt Etsy artisans, eBay sellers, and other online micro businesses. According to a recent article in The Atlantic, bills like SB 355 will ultimately help Walmart by weakening the competitive advantage of large-scale online shopping platforms whose success is a much larger existential threat to their bottom line than thieves could ever be. This bill, it won't stop sophisticated counterfeiters who will surely adapt to the new rules. 15 states have already rejected bills similar to SB 355, prioritizing the needs of online entrepreneurs and consumer choice. Legislators in both Republican and Democratic-led states agreed this legislation would add additional obstacles that would ultimately hurt small sellers, decrease opportunity, increase red tape, and hinder consumers in search of a deal. The only state to pass this legislation is, as you said, Walmart's home state of Arkansas. And finally, a federal compromise version of this bill has already been endorsed by both retailers and leading online marketplaces, making this legislation unnecessary. In October, U.S. House members introduced the Federal Informed Consumers Act to combat the online sale of stolen, counterfeit, and dangerous consumer products. This legislation is supported by retail groups, along with a coalition including Etsy and eBay, and Amazon as well. And just to point out a few things that were said in earlier testimonies, H.R. 5502 has been voted out of the committee and will be going to the floor. And this bill, as it stands, does have a lot of differences than the federal version. For example, the 5,000 number in this bill, at the federal level, the number is actually 20,000. Online marketplaces are largely borderless and don't observe state-by-state boundaries. Since SB 355 greatly differs from the federal version, passing this bill would exacerbate a patchwork of state laws on an issue that is more properly addressed at the federal level. The consensus approach reflected in the federal version of the legislation represents the best model for tackling this issue without harming online sellers. We hope you will heed the perspective of legislators who have assessed the consequences of passing state versions of this legislation and oppose SB 355. This bill will take sides for Walmart against Amazon, will hurt small online business owners, and has been rejected in all but one state legislature. We encourage the New Hampshire legislature to instead support the improved federal compromise version of this bill that has broader support. And I would be open to taking any questions you may have. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. So would you be in support of the federal version of this?
On the federal level, yes.
So we're looking to incorporate that into this bill. Would you then be more likely to support this at that point?
I definitely think, thank you for your question. I definitely think that it's a step in the right direction, but I do still believe, and the Chamber of Progress still does believe, that it will be creating a sort of patchwork among the states. Each state would have different rules, different regulations that could ultimately end up hurting smaller sellers. For example, if somebody was selling something in New Hampshire, and New Hampshire, took verbatim what the federal bill is, maybe they're selling in Florida and the rules may be a little different, they may be suspended in Florida and therefore would miss out on supplemental income that they may rely on. So that's why we, the Chamber of Progress, do support it at the federal level instead of state.
Great, thank you. Senator Bradley?
Thank you very much. So what if we were to add a contingency clause that, especially since this bill takes effect January 1st, that it only becomes effective if the federal legislation doesn't move in the next year?
Like I said, I think the ideal situation would be to defer to the federal level.
Go ahead.
You get the floor.
That might be the ideal situation, and having served in Washington before, I would agree with you on that. But also having served in Washington before, I know dysfunction when I see
Yes.
dysfunction. And if, I think it's highly unlikely anything passes this Congress. And so, again, I would ask you the same question. If it doesn't go into effect by the end of this year, what would your position be if this were contingent upon that not happening?
The position, I believe, would still stay the same, still opposing this legislation. I think that there are other ways to handle the situation. I know other states that have rejected similar bills, like California, for example, have created task force in order to provide the state with more resources to stop crimes at the front, so that we're not trying to then backtrack or go forward and try to correct a problem after it's already been done.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Gannon?
Thank you for taking my question. One of the earlier speakers, Mr. Demers, mentioned how somebody in our Senate building here bought bad face masks that were all moldy, and they had no recourse, nowhere to go. So I just don't see how the 5 things that are asked for here, name, address, email, phone, tax, or bank account, I don't see how that is an onerous burden on the seller. Maybe you could tell me how it is more.
Yeah,
That I don't see it.
And thank you so much for your question. The Chamber of Progress, we do believe that there needs to be some sort of verification process. Absolutely, transparency is key. But the onerous part about it is the amount of time, the turnaround time for verifying that information. For example, as soon as somebody hits $5,000, for example, they have 24 hours to respond, to give all that information. A lot of times, especially small businesses that may not have the manpower to consistently keep up with everything, may miss the 24-hour mark, and from there will be suspended. Their business will, they'll be out of business. I also think that the tracking system that they have to report to, for example, that's also an issue that would be onerous as well, because currently there is no tracking system used for verification. And in the legislation, it's kind of vague. It doesn't say that the legislation will actually create this tracking system or not. So that kind of leaves the sellers with their hands in the air. Like, how do I verify? What third party will I go to? There is no third party, and that will also cause them to miss the 24-hour mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you so much for your time.
Jody Grimbliss supports, does not wish to speak. Anyone else wishing to speak on this matter? Seeing none, I'll close the hearing on Senate Bill 355. And we'll take up Senate Bill 345 with the prime sponsor, Senator Hennessy. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Chairman French and members of the Commerce Committee. It's very nice to be before you.
Great to have you.
Thank you. I'm going to switch gears and talk about our kids here. Senate bills, first of all, I am Erin Hennessy. I am from District 1, the great northern part of our state, which is beautiful and cold right now. So Senate Bill 345 deals with our child labor laws, and you should have received an amendment to this. It is Amendment 2022-0093S, and this amendment replaces the entirety of the bill. So I will start with that. If you've gone into any of your local restaurants or any of your shops on your main streets, or you've listened to your voicemails or your emails, you know that we have a really severe workforce shortage right now in the state. One of the things that I noticed when I was going to some of my local restaurants over the past several months is that a lot of my friends' kids are starting to work, and these 14-year-olds, it's nice to see them when they seat you at a table inside or outside, whatever your choice may be. But one thing they can't do right now is clear glasses on a table. And this bill has 3 parts. The first part, lines 3 through 9 of the amendment, allows 14-year-olds to bus tables. Currently, in New Hampshire law, 14-year-olds can work, but you cannot bus a table with alcohol glasses until you are 15. And you cannot bus a table with glasses unless you're 16, if that is in a lounge area. So this bill attempts to clarify that 14-year-olds who are able to work in the state of New Hampshire can help bus tables. The second part of the bill deals with the aggregate amount of time that a 16 or 17-year-old can work. Oh, and I forgot to mention that in part 1, the Liquor Commission should have sent you guys a letter saying that they are in support of this and have no issues with it. The second part of the bill has to do with 16 and 17-year-olds and the amount of time that they can work during a school week. So right now we have a tiered approach to 16 and 17-year-olds, and this is very confusing not only for our teens working but also for our employers. So this attempts to clarify this position, saying that if you're 16 or 17 years old and school is in session for 5 days during that week, you cannot work more than 30 hours, and that's already in there. But it just takes out the rest of the tiered approach. So if it's on school vacation or there's some days during the week that they have teachers are working and kids don't have to go, like my kids will be home tomorrow, that they can work additional hours over the 30. The third part of the bill deals with night work. In our current statute, RSA 276-A13, it limits the amount of hours that our children can work, but this is going back and forth with different constituents and lobbyists and the Department of Labor. It's a very confusing statute, and a lot of 16 and 17-year-olds think they can't work past 8 o'clock at night, but that's not true. And then our labor laws already protect our 14 and 15-year-old workers. So in discussion with the Department of Labor, I've decided just to scratch this out. So getting rid of a confusing statute that I think that we don't actually need. And I'm happy to take questions.
Very good. Any questions? Senator Kavanagh.
Thank you, Senator, for taking my question. So on this amendment, lines 14 through 19, and I see the same thing. They're struggling to get anyone to work. And in my mind, I think they should pay more than have the employees. But so is that eliminating, if I can't get my employees and I have 16 and 17-year-olds, I can have them work 60 hours?
If school is not in session, then I believe so. And the Department of Labor can follow up with that, and I'm open to adjustment on this area. But I can tell you that if you ask your 16, 17-year-olds to work 60 hours and they don't want to, they can go right next door right now.
That won't always be, though.
Yes, that's true.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Senator Gannon?
It's probably not really pertinent, but how many hours can a 14-year-old work?
Sorry, I don't have that information in front of me.
That's okay.
I think it might be 28, but you can ask the Department of Labor that information. That all of the 14 and 15-year-old, they're covered by the federal labor laws, and I'm not trying to adjust those.
Follow up?
Sure.
So we've had this type of legislation before, and I always have a problem that, you know me, education's my main thing. I want the next generation. I'm like the immigrant who comes over. You want that next one to do better. I want the kids to go to better schools, Ivies, little Ivies. And I get scared when especially young ages here. And I differ from a lot of my colleagues. And I know I can hear Senator Guida talking now that work is good and it's great for you, which it is. 14 gets me nervous because then the kids value the job so highly. And I want them studying so they're the next doctors and lawyers. I don't want them to limit their career. And as I see heavier and heavier hours, it gives me pause. So that's my only comment for you. And I'll have to think about it.
Can I just say something to that?
Sure.
Is that okay? Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this doesn't change the amount of hours a 14-year-old can work. The first part of this just clarifies, and you're allowed to bus tables.
Quick follow-up, Mr. Chair. So again, and again, I probably should have read this bill more. I'm still half in yesterday's 304 session in my head. That 14-year-old is in it again. Can he work nights? Because I'm thinking clearing tables at a restaurant. And I'm thinking school starts my kids are up at 6 in the morning heading to school. How late can they work?
I am happy to get you the details on what
Okay.
hours they're allowed to work. I am not touching any of that.
Okay.
That is federally regulated for 14 and 15-year-olds,
late
and
they
it's
can work.
very strict.
On how late they can work?
Yep, how late they can work, how many hours during the week.
Thank you very much.
Seeing no other questions?
Thank you.
Very much, Senator. We have the Department of Labor here. Rudy?
Good afternoon. Thank you. Good afternoon. For the record, Rudy Ogden, Deputy Commissioner, Department of Labor. So just following up, happy to answer any questions, but just in terms of context or additional information, we were able to speak with the Senator relative to this bill. In terms of the first provisions relating to busing of tables, as was noted, that's not labor law. That's related to Department or Liquor Commission laws concerning what they can or can't do. So we don't have any input or guidance relative to that. Concerning the questions relative to the hours that youth can work, it is very important to consider that you're essentially dealing with two categories. You have 16 and over, so 16 to 17, and then you have under 16. Under 16, so 14 and 15-year-olds principally, federal law mandates and has certain requirements that are actually stricter than ours. I'll go through them briefly, and I'm happy to follow up in writing if that's helpful, Senators. But in terms of 14 and 15-year-olds, under federal law, they can only work 7 to 7. They can only work 3 hours on a school day. They can only work 18 hours in a school week, and they can only work 40 hours during the summer. As Senator Hennessy referenced, she is not changing any of the existing New Hampshire laws, which are slightly more relaxed than the federal requirements. Essentially, it's 7 to 9, 3 hours on a school day, 23 in a school week, and 48 on a vacation week. Again, I'm happy to follow up in writing. I don't mean to ramble on and on, but I just want to be very clear that 14 and 15-year-olds, there are restrictions. Federal restrictions or requirements are actually a little bit more stringent than state requirements. So I just point that out. I would note, and folks from the hospitality industry can certainly correct me, but that in our experience, most hospitality individuals, and actually most employers in the state, actually are covered under federal requirements. Because federal requirements, there's a revenue threshold of $500,000, which not everyone meets, but then it's $500,000 or interstate commerce. And most of the employers in New Hampshire, certain ones aren't, but most of them engage in interstate commerce because they accept credit cards and things of that nature. So in terms of the sliding scale that's being eliminated in the portion. I would note a couple sessions ago that was introduced to allow more flexibility. Essentially, I think there was, I don't mean to speak for them, but I think that employers were desirous of, okay, if you have a student who has only 3 days of school that week, why would they still be capped at the 30 hours? So I think that this was the intent of that language. I would note, as the senator said, in practice, many employers have indicated that it's confusing, that they're not really taking advantage of it. Again, others in industry could probably speak to it better than me, but I would note that we have heard that it's somewhat confusing. The last point on night work, I would acknowledge that night work, since I've been at the Department of Labor, it has been a somewhat frustrating statute in the sense of, to me, and I'm not advocating for this, but for me, a night work protection would be more simple or more prominent if it simply said, hey, 16 and 17-year-olds can't work past midnight. Or if it said, hey, 16 and 17-year-olds can only work so many hours in a week after 10 p.m. Our existing law does not say that. Our existing law says that if you work between the hours of 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. 2 times in a week, you cannot work longer than 8-hour shifts during that week. Even as I say it, I acknowledge that that's a mouthful. It's a little confusing. I think in some ways the intent there was to say, okay, if kids are working some of those hours, they shouldn't be working extra long shifts, or some way trying to guard against through the night shifts. But I just want to be clear, 16 and 17-year-olds under existing law can work through the night. So again, if they're going to have a night work protection, I think that we should redraft it and reframe it. I'm not taking, or the department's not taking, a policy position relative to that, but I just point out that yes, that is looked at as a confusing law. Yes, as some people have said to me, well, my kid can work all night, and I would say, yes, they can. So I just point that out. Happy to take any questions that you folks have.
Thank you. Senator Susi.
Thank you, Assistant Commissioner. Along the lines of the night work portion, do you get a lot of complaints? Are there a lot of enforcement actions taken, or is it just so complicated that people really don't know or not if there are violations that occur?
So I would note that it comes up quite often as a violation, because what might happen is a youth's shift ends at 9 p.m. And then at some other, and that happens a couple times during the week, and then at some point during the week they may have been scheduled for an 8-hour shift and they go over. So it certainly comes up. I would say that the actual complaint that comes to us is there are parents who call and say, my 16-year-old was working till 10 p.m. That's not allowed, right? And we say, no, they can work till 10 p.m. So again, I'm not trying to push for that. I'm just saying that that is the complaint that comes in. It's not, necessarily that, the existing law, they're complaining about something that doesn't exist. They're saying they shouldn't be working at that hour.
So just as a follow-up, if I may, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, I'm just saying it seems to me that perhaps a bright line might be easier to enforce, whether it's a certain time or just limiting the hours across the board.
Yes, as I've indicated, with this particular law, I always have the concern that it's weird to say, enforce something if you have a hard time explaining exactly what it's trying to achieve, and I acknowledge that.
Great, thank you.
You were next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We all worked when we were kids. I remember even with the carousel in Bedford, we had to go there late Sunday night and break down all the tables and chairs, and it was cash money. It was great. But, the thing that concerns me with this is just when you looked at, when I pointed out lines 14 to 19, in a vacation week, 6 consecutive days or more, or more than 48 hours in that work week. So eliminating that, could they really tell that 16 or 17-year-old, you got to work that 60 hours this week or 70 or 80 hours? Is there a restriction still in place for that?
Yeah, thank you, Senator Kevin. I appreciate you asking that question, because I forgot to mention from earlier, I heard that question, I didn't touch upon it. There is under 276A11, the provision that's called certain labor, and it just in a very generalized sense that says no youth, so inclusive of 16 and 17-year-old, shall not work more than 10 hours in a day or 48 hours in a week.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I apologize for that.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very
Thank you.
much for clarifying it. Senator Ward is in support, not speaking. Representative Peter Torosian is in support, not speaking. Mike Summers is in support and will be speaking. Mike?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Mike Summers. I'm the President and CEO of the New Hampshire Lodging and Restaurant Association, here testifying in support of Senate Bill 345. Again, I think you've kind of gone through this ad nauseum, so I think we're supportive of all of the changes. Just quickly point out, there is certainly a lot of frustration with industry around youth labor, as I'm sure you can sense just from what Rudy just said, and what many of you have probably heard over time. I think what this bill does, which I think is great, first section obviously allows flexibility for younger folks to be bussing tables, which for those of us that started out in the industry, myself included, I bussed tables, wasn't an issue back when I did it. The second piece that this bill does really leads to the comment that I think has been made already, that what was put in place a couple of years ago just created a whole raft of confusion, frankly, and it didn't really help anybody. The one comment I would make is that the 30-hour threshold, industry would like to see that number raised. Now, what that number might be, I don't know, 32, 35, something. And the reason I say that is, if you're, so let me just give you a for instance. So if I was a youth working in a restaurant, I'm bussing tables, I work a Tuesday night, a Wednesday night, I work 3.5, 4 hours each night. You know, we get in a situation where you can rapidly get to 30 hours and really not be able to work as many hours as you might like on the weekend. And so that creates a little bit of a restriction on what can be done. And we have heard that there are some youths, more in the 16, 17-year-old, I'm not really talking about 14 and 15, but in the 16 and 17-year-old tier, we have heard through industry that there are some kids that will work as many hours as they can in one business and go down the street and work another job. And, you know, there's no real way for any individual business to police that, but, you know, obviously the business that has them for the 30 hours would love to have them for 32 or 35 hours or whatever it might be. And then the third point I would make is under the youth night work, huge point of confusion for the industry. And I'll use my example again of a youth that works, you know, a couple of nights a week bussing tables, and now gets in a situation where they might be able to, again, maybe they're saving up for a car. I don't know what the situation is, but now on a Saturday or Sunday, because they've worked a couple of evenings until 8:30, they can no longer work a 9 or a 10-hour shift, even though it may be available to them. So, you know, that change would actually add some flexibility to the system, which I think a lot of our young workers are looking for. So, with that, I will happily answer questions.
Thank you. Senator Bradley?
Thank you very much. So what would your preference be on line 13? You said 30 to possibly 32 or 35.
I mean, we would be interested in seeing 35, but again, I think that's the discretion of this committee.
Anyone else? Senator Gannon?
Hi, Mike. I feel like I'm always in the minority lately. So if you're working, you want to up it to 30, 35 hours. When I'm 16, I see that car, I want that car, that's more important than anything. Geez, that AP calculus homework, the thing that's going to get me the real jump in life, so I can have a biology degree, a chemistry degree, all those hard courses. If you're working 30, 35 hours, I have 4 kids. I let them work if they can have their 4.3, 4.4 average. I just see that this is too many hours. The real picture should be education and the kids going further. I think kids are gonna look at the dollar and say, wow, I had a girl who worked at my gym. She was in my daughter's classes, straight A student, then she just was always at the gym. I'd go there at night. Doesn't look like I go to the gym, but I used to. And she was there, and then she was always working because she wanted more money, more money, more money. And then her grades dropped, and then her future is very limited compared to other people. I'm just afraid the more hours you work, you're putting a dollar bill in front of them. I don't mind them working. To me, working is Saturday and Sunday when they could, but to put 32 hours, 35 hours, it's a full-time job. When are they going to study? And I feel we're impeding their real future.
Well, Senator, thank you for the question. And frankly, I have kids too that are in this age group, and we've certainly encouraged them to take jobs because I think it teaches, the basic skills of life, customer service, responsibility, et cetera. But I think that, we run our house, I think much like you have potentially, I think you said you ran yours, where, if your grade point average drops, you're not working anymore, or you're working less hours or whatever it might be. But ultimately, I think where I come down is, if I'm a 16 or 17-year-old saving up for a car, and I am already working 2 jobs to maximize my potential earnings, what's the difference between that and working at one location? And ultimately, I think that, some kids, and I will say this about some of our younger generation, the group we're talking about here, during the course of the pandemic, they have been a huge positive surprise for us in the industry. They have showed up, they have worked hard, they have been fantastic and reliable, and, excuse me, frankly, to offer them the hours that they may want to work on a Saturday and Sunday, I think, let's give them the opportunity if they would like to take it. But I certainly appreciate your comments about education, and I wholeheartedly support them. But again, I think this just gives flexibility where a business and a student and the student's parents can essentially come to an arrangement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Senator Susie.
If I may, just getting back to the issue of night work, is there any bright line that your industry might suggest, whether it's a weeknight time limit or a weekend time limit, recognizing the difference? Is that something just for ease of administration of and understanding what students are subjected to?
I'm hesitant to offer a recommendation simply because I haven't thought deeply about what that bright line might be. Obviously, you can appreciate that our businesses operate at night. As I think about other workplaces, grocery stores and others, they're working probably till at least 9 o'clock, 9:30 after close. So, I would think it would have to be later than that. But I hesitate to point to a bright line without really asking a lot of questions of industry professionals and coming back with some legitimate responses.
That's fair. But would you believe I would be open to hearing if there's like a school night bright line versus a weekend or holiday?
Yes, and I think it's fair to say that we should consider school days and weekends separately, right? So yeah, but we would certainly be open to further discussion, yes.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Any others? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
You do realize I got these who became a senator. Curtis Berry is in support, not wishing to speak, and Mike Sillen is in support and looking to speak.
Thank you, Chairman French.
Good afternoon. Good to see you again.
Same. And thank you to the rest of the committee. For those of you who have not met me, my name is Michael Sillen. I'm from Freedom, New Hampshire. I represent Aroma Joe's. We have 82 stores across 5 states. I own and operate 19 of those stores myself with my brother. 13 of those 19 are in New Hampshire, and I think it's important for all of you to know, out of those 82 stores, 38 of them are in New Hampshire. New Hampshire is where we started. Very proud of that. We probably have in excess of 700 employees right now in the state. We have a very high turnover, and I know at first someone might think, oh, why? We're also very proud of that. There's got to be thousands, if not tens of thousands of people that we have been their first job. I'm here today in support of this bill, and I would like to tell, briefly a little bit about the business. So we are open from 5:15 a.m. to 9 p.m. And as everyone has testified here before me today, the rules as written have been very confusing. They're not just confusing to the employers, they're confusing to the kids, they're confusing to the parents, they're even confusing to guidance counselors, school administrators, job fairs. So I believe the bill as written and as it continues to evolve and be discussed is clearing up all of those issues. We pride ourselves in scheduling around these kids, and as Senator Gannon mentioned, their schoolwork. It is important to us. Their education is important to us. 2020 is much different than 1990, 1980, and 1970. When I went to school, you showed up at a certain time, the bell rang, you moved from one period to the next, and you were home at a certain time. If you were lucky enough to have an afternoon job, that was it, and you sat around a dinner table with your family. Your parents made sure you did your homework. If your grades dropped, you lost some privileges. At least that's how it was in my household, and I think most of us here probably grew up like that. For the education the way it works now, at least what I'm seeing in a lot of the districts that we have stores, it's all changing. Kids show up at all different times of day. They leave during the day. They get out early. It's a moving target. There's remote learning now, and with the labor shortage that we all know and that we're all suffering through, cleaning up the language and adopting this bill would be a huge help to us as employers. And I'm not here selfishly to ask for, we need help. I need rules loosened so that I can operate my business. It's not about that. We have 16 and 17-year-old kids that want to work more hours. Good students, kids that play sports, kids that have extracurricular activities that we work around. Our longest shift is 4 hours. That's typically a 4-hour shift for us. So as it was discussed earlier today, when currently as written, when someone gets out of school, goes home and does their homework, and then comes in and works 5 to 9, that's great for 2 nights out of the week, 5 to 9. But then I'm limited to what they can work on the weekend. And I'm here to, basically answer any questions that you may have about our business model, but I know that this would be a huge help to us and to our kids to allow them to stay at one employer, because it's no joke, and you've heard it today. They will work everything that they can for me, and they'll want more hours, but without violating the current law, we cannot give it to them, and they just go work for the restaurant next door, the grocery store down the street, and now they're just working 2 jobs. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Mike. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.
Anyone else wishing to speak on this matter? Seeing none, I'll close the hearing on Senate Bill 345. I'll open the hearing on Senate Bill 209, and welcome the sponsor, Senator Carson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Senate Commerce Committee. For the record, my name is Sharon Carson, and I have the pleasure of representing Senate District 14, comprising of the towns of Londonderry, Hudson, and Auburn. I have for your consideration this afternoon Senate Bill 209, relative to electronic wage payments, and I have also passed out an amendment for the committee to consider as well. And this bill amends the provisions related to payment of an employee's wages by direct deposit. There are folks from the industry that are sitting here who can speak to this bill more eloquently than I can. And so I am going to conclude my testimony, and thank you for your time.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Rudy Ogden.
Thank you, Chairman French. Again, just for the record, my name is Rudy Ogden, Deputy Commissioner for the New Hampshire Department of Labor. Relative to this bill, we just wanted to point out a few things. One thing is I would note is we do get questions concerning direct deposit or the lack of the ability to do that. Presently, existing law would say that if an employer wants to elect different payment options, they can do that. But if they try and pay in a form other than cash or by payroll card or through direct deposit, the employer right now has the right to ask for a paper check. We understand the notion of a paper check is becoming increasingly antiquated. The only thing we would point out that it's important to remember is that there are a number of folks, perhaps more than we would think, that do not have bank accounts. Oftentimes you'll hear about the unbanked. For various reasons, there are folks who don't have bank accounts. Folks without bank accounts, of course, would not be able to get direct deposit. So it's just something we bring up and note. Historically, the department has had concerns with pay cards, and while I won't bring out or trot out a parade of horribles, I did want to highlight just one concern that we think should potentially look at being addressed going forward, and that's this idea that there have been incidents or complaints that have come to the department where a pay card is being used. The employer is loading funds onto the pay card, okay, I've paid the wages via pay card, and then for whatever the reasons are, whether it's an activation problem or some other issue, the employee is not able to access those funds. And then when they go to the employer's position is, well, we have processed the payment with the payroll pay card provider, take it up with them. And then the pay card provider is saying, well, we don't know what the issue is. Talk to your HR about, how they got you onto the card. So the department would note that we see that as a concern. We would look at the employer as still responsible, and we would say that the employer has an issue there where they would need to effect immediate payment to correct that. I'll give a really, again, antiquated analogy in saying right now an employer could pay by mail with a check, a paper check. If the check never arrives, we do look to the employer and say, okay, you need to correct that in the immediate. And I just point out that we would view this in a similar vein. The last thing that I would note, and I apologize, is I don't think I've seen the recent amendment, but as drafted, this would allow for essentially an A through E approach where, thank you so much. Thank you. Apologies, I'm just trying to see. So the one question we would have is just, is the intent that the employer would be able to say, you need to use a payroll card, or is it that the employer would be able to say, I'm not paying with a paper check, I'm paying direct deposit, and then if the person can't get direct deposit, they then could proffer the payroll card. So I just want to be clear, are we saying that even if I have a bank account, you can make me use a payroll card? That's a question we have. I think from the language I'm seeing that it would be at the employer's request. Again, that's just the employer's, not request, but their ability to direct. So that's just for us, we'd have some concern with that if a person had a bank account, could they elect to receive at least direct deposit? So understanding paper checks are harder and harder to get. There is some value in them, but if we're moving away from that to total electronic payment, would there still be any appetite for allowing for that type of choice of I want direct deposit as opposed to a payroll card? Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the committee? Senator Susie?
Good. To the point you just raised, and it was the concern I have on line 9 of the bill, it would appear that the written authorization portion is removed for the direct deposit.
Yeah, again, as we interpreted the initial bill, it's saying essentially that the employer would be able to pay the employee using A through E, anyone they elect. Which again, that's
so just to recap, the option is now no longer the employees potentially with passage of this bill, but the employers?
Correct. The employer would be able to dictate.
Regardless of whether or not the employee has a bank account or has access to be able to use a pay card conveniently to obtain money.
It would be the employer's election, yeah.
Thank you.
Any others? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we have one speaker, Pete Iceberg, is it?
Thank you, Chairman French. Members of the committee, my name is Pete Iceberg. I represent ADP. ADP is the largest payroll company in the nation. We pay 1 out of every 6 U.S. workers today. And this bill actually would help ensure that workers are paid on time. And the classic example, especially here in New Hampshire, is just bad weather. But we've had a horrible time in the past couple of years with COVID, government shutdowns, travel restrictions, and just inclement weather. It's very, very common for, it happens to be snowing on payday and nobody gets paid if there's a snowstorm on payday. That is antiquated. That's not good for workers, not good for employers. They can't comply with the wage and hour law. So this bill would actually give employers the ability to offer a choice of either direct deposit or payroll cards to workers. So they would offer both, and it would be up to the employee to choose, well, do I want direct deposit? Most do. Actually, 93% of U.S. workers get their pay today through direct deposit. But if you don't have a bank account, or if you just prefer a payroll card, that would be the option for you. So, but electronic payment of wages through direct deposit or payroll cards is very efficient. It's reliable. It's a cost-saving measure for employers. And we think the modernizing wage payment laws would help promote economic development as well. Most states already allow this. 29 states, including Maine and Massachusetts, permit employers to offer either payroll cards or direct deposit, and they don't require paper checks, which is good, because paper checks are really poor choices for workers. I mean, they've got, as I mentioned, God forbid there's bad weather, you have to take extra steps, put yourself at risk to go to the workplace, pick up your check, go to the bank, present the check, wait for check clearing. It's not good. And the alternative to that, if you get a paper check, is you're going to a costly check cashing store. And then you're carrying your entire net pay in cash, which is subject to loss or theft. Payroll cards are a much better choice, we think. So, and again, 93% of American workers are already paid through direct deposit. Payroll cards is the alternative. They've evolved. They're a lot better than they used to be for workers. You really have to go out of your way to be charged a fee to use a payroll card. Really the only way that there's a fee charged typically is if you go to an out-of-network ATM, but it's very easy to find an in-network ATM from wherever you are. It's also very easy to go into any bank that has a Visa or a MasterCard logo, an affiliate bank, and just go to the teller over the counter and say, I'd like the full amount of this, whatever's on this card in cash. They do that with no fee. Very easy to do. It's like any other debit card. You can use that to pay for retail purchases. You can ask for cash back. They can basically use a payroll card anywhere that you would use a check. So there's free online bill payment. You can do internet shopping, which you can't do with cash. Obviously, there's protection from fraud, unauthorized use. There's dispute resolution with these cards. They can't be overdrafted. There's no NSF fees, unlike a bank account. And they often include free savings accounts or additional cards for family members, which is helpful for, for example, kids in college. Lastly, there's also earlier availability in the sense that most banks actually process payroll payments prior to payday, so that those net payments are actually on the card prior to the scheduled payday. And electronic wage statements, the pay stubs themselves, are generally available a day or two prior to payday. So we think this is much better for New Hampshire businesses. It's much better for workers. Helps them, make sure that they comply with the wage and hour law. And we think it's a matter of when, not if. Like European workers haven't seen a paycheck in decades. So I think we're getting there, just a matter of when. Happy to take any questions.
So, an employer historically has determined how they were going to pay their employees, correct? And over the years, it's been through checks.
Well, the labor law requires currently that they offer a choice of checks, direct deposit, payroll cards, cash. So we're suggesting that you'd eliminate the mandate that they offer paper checks as well. But any employer, again, if you're an employer and, for example, you had a collective bargaining agreement, you could choose to just continue offering checks. There's no problem there.
Okay. Most employers don't pay in cash. Some do, but they still have that option here, right?
Sure.
Sure. So, and employer historically has determined how they were going to pay their employees, correct? And over the years, it's been through checks. And they could pay by check if they choose.
Yes.
Okay. Senator Bradley, do you have a question? No? Senator Kavanaugh?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this would apply to under 18 as well?
I'm sorry, to,
Would that apply to employees under the age of 18 as well?
yes, all employees.
Okay. Yeah, I have no problem with the direct deposit. I think it's easier. I worry about not having the employee's consent and a kid who doesn't have that account, or who knows, doesn't want to tell his parents how much he made and has that card. I mean, I've had the same situation with Venmo, right? You know, the banks are making more fines because they don't have the proper money or the protections. I think there's a lot of things with the pay card that you're going to have some potential, especially for kids that don't pay attention to the amount that's in there, and they overdraft in that money. And I think it's, I love direct deposit, don't get me wrong, but I think the bank cards, the pay cards really scare me.
Thank you, Senator. That's a good question. And actually, these payroll cards, they can't be overdrafted. So, I mean, if you make any transaction, it's not possible to overdraft them, and so there's no NSF fees ever.
You just deny, sorry, follow up?
Go
You
ahead.
just deny the payment then?
Yes, yes. If you're trying to, make a transaction and there's not enough money in the account, that's just a declined transaction.
Okay, well, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak on Senate Bill 209? Seeing none, I'll close the hearing. And we've saved the best for last. I'll open the hearing on Senate Bill 384. Senator Caddy.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of Commerce. For the record, I'm Denise Ricciardi, the Senator for District 9. I was tasked to be on a committee about distracted driving, and as a result, I bring this bill forward. Distracted driving is a major public health and safety concern and a major problem in our New Hampshire roadways. Distracted driving, speeding, and impaired driving are the top 3 reasons for car crashes in New Hampshire. A broader education campaign, as this bill outlines, awareness of the hands-free law. Education is one way, along with penalties, that we change driver behavior. Whether it's texting, calling, navigating, or something else. Using your cell phone while driving can be dangerous. In fact, texting and driving can have the same consequences as drinking and driving, deaths and injuries. New Hampshire passed a hands-free law in 2014 and went into effect in 2015. I have a flyer that I've given Aaron for figures. As part of the education campaign, so 3,142 people were killed in the United States by distracted driving. That's about 8 people every day. 26,000 people were killed in the United States by distracted driving from 2012 to 2019. 7% of all fatal crashes in 2019 were distraction related, and that is an increase of 9.9% over 2018, where 2,858 lives were lost due to distracted driving. About 1 in every 5 people are killed by distracted drivers. And in 2018, they were not in vehicles. They were walking, riding bikes, or otherwise when they were hit by a distracted driver. Driver distraction is responsible for more than 58% of teen crashes. Sending or reading a text that takes your eyes off of the road for 5 seconds while driving 55 miles per hour is like driving the length of a football field with your eyes closed. Drivers can experience what's known as the hangover effect, a lasting mental distraction that can last up to 27 seconds after a driver uses their mobile device, even while stopped at a red light or a stop sign. In 2019, AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety conducted a nationwide survey which found 96% most drivers believe that typing or reading on a handheld cell phone while driving is extremely dangerous. Unfortunately, some do it anyway. 40% admit to reading and 29% admit to texting on their smartphone at least once while behind the wheel within the past month. It's universally understood that crashes caused by distracted driving are underreported. Many factors, from drivers not admitting cell phone use to the lack of consistency in crash reports being used to collect the data at the scene. It makes it very challenging to determine a very accurate number. I felt that to help offset the costs of something like this, because this would be to educate at the point of sale. So when someone goes to buy their phone, it's another piece of paper, it's signage, just like we have in liquor stores about the age limit for drinking. So the telecommunications is a very lucrative industry, and I think it would be good if they could contribute to this awareness. But in addition to that, I have confirmed support from Dartmouth Hitchcock Hospital, Chiefs of Police Association, Department of Transportation, National Safety Council, the Nurses Association, the Auto Dealers Association, all in support of this bill, and I am waiting on confirmation from others. But I have also, through Dan Goodman with AAA, they have offered to contribute to the cost to make this bill come to fruition, as well as the New Hampshire Auto Dealer Association, the Office of Highway Safety, and the New Hampshire Nurses Association. I thank you and would like you to please consider moving this bill forward, ought to pass, so that we can start to educate our drivers and that they can uphold the law that we have. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Nice. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much,
Thank you.
Senator. John Brivonsky. It's 5. I really screwed up with another one. You weren't here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a good rendition of the name. Thank you. I'm John Brivonsky. I'm the Chief of Police in Bedford, and I am here in support of this bill. And I also represent the New Hampshire Chiefs of Police Association, who is also supporting this bill. Awareness for hands-free and distracted driving is a critical first step in making sure that all drivers and operators in the state of New Hampshire are fully aware of the hands-free law. Oftentimes, our officers come in contact with residents who profess to have no knowledge of the hands-free law, particularly younger drivers. So this measure is particularly useful in beginning the awareness and educational component of making sure that everyone who is in possession of a mobile device here in the Granite State is fully aware of the hands-free law. And just again, while I don't want to repeat Senator Ricciardi's excellent rendition of national statistics, I can tell you that in Bedford, we conducted a study in 2018, in 2019, and in 2020 to determine the primary causal factors for crashes and collisions in the town of Bedford. And of course, as you all know, we have South River Road, Route 3, and Route 101 that passes through Bedford that carries around 37,000 cars a day just on 101 alone. And so we found that in those studies, that distracted driving is the #1 cause for collisions in the town of Bedford during those years. So as a matter of highway safety, we focus on hands-free enforcement laws. The last year that we have stats, which is 2020, somewhat impacted by COVID, as you may know, with traffic, but we issued over 800 summonses for distracted driving in the town of Bedford in 2020, up from just over 700 summonses in 2019, and up from about 300 summonses in 2018. So it is a very difficult problem, vexing problem for us, but
enforcement and education is certainly the best way forward, and this is a great bill to start the awareness component. Thank you for your time, and I will certainly answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you. Do you know what the fine is for a violation in the state?
It's the first violation is $124. That's with the fine and fee component involved. And then the fee structure escalates beyond that. I believe the next, and I'm working off of my memory here, the chiefs don't issue a lot of tickets, but I do issue some. I think that the second violation is $310, but I'm not sure. I can tell you that in the state of New York, for example, texting and driving after 3 violations of texting and driving in the state of New York results in an automatic license suspension.
Great, thank you.
Hi, Chief, thank you.
Sorry. Go ahead, Senator.
Okay, thank you. Real quick, Chief, in driver's ed, do they hand anything out? I would assume right there. I'm not saying that's good enough, but I'm hoping they do.
Same thing.
Driver's education, certainly, if this were to be amended to ensure that all driver's ed instructors would provide this to all new operators in the state of New Hampshire during their driver education process, that would also be an excellent way of getting. And I was handed by Senator Ricciardi, the second offense is $250.
Thank you, Chief.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tom Prazel is in support, not wishing to speak. Adam Schmidt is opposed and not wishing to speak. Dan Bennett is in support, not looking to speak. And Michael Dugas is in support, not looking to speak. Anyone here wishing to speak on this? Seeing none, I'll close the hearing on Senate Bill 384. Motion to adjourn? Well, I'm not, what are you looking to exec? Nothing. Everything. I'll take a motion to adjourn. Made by Senator Kavanaugh, second by Senator Soucy. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Just Bradley. Thank you. You are opposed. I know you are. Nice try.
So Donna, we're gonna have the poor kids who should be going, this girl's really smart, she should be in here with my daughter. Instead, she was always working. Greatest plumber, she's not doing